What if the moment you've been avoiding is the very reason you were chosen? There's a woman in the Bible who never speaks directly to God. No prayer recorded, no vision, no angel at a well, no voice in the night. Just a girl, an orphan, a foreigner living in exile. Chosen for something she never asked for, and then placed by the silent hand of a God whose name does not even appear in her book, exactly where she needed to be. Her name was Esther. And before she was a queen, before she was a hero, before she stood in a doorway that could have meant her death, she was nobody. An orphan in Persia with a secret and a cousin who loved her. This is her diary. Entry 1. Before Esther. Esther 1:1-22, Imagined Interior. I want to tell you about the woman who came before me. Her name was Vashti, Queen Vashti. I never met her. I only heard what everyone heard, the story that spread through Susa like smoke through a tent, impossible to contain. King Ahasuerus, Xerxes, the most powerful man in the known world, had been holding a feast. 180 days of feasting and drinking and displaying the wealth of his empire. And then, on the seventh day, when his heart was merry with wine, he sent for Vashti. He wanted to display her. She was beautiful. He wanted his nobles and officials to see her beauty. He wanted to show her off the way he showed off his gold and his marble and his purple curtains. She said no. Just no. The most powerful man in the world sent for her, and Queen Vashti refused to come. The king was furious. His advisors were terrified, not just for the king's pride, but for their own households. If the queen could refuse the king, what would wives everywhere start to think? They told the king, "This cannot stand." And so a decree went out across 127 provinces. Find the king a new queen. I think about Vashti sometimes. She said no when no could cost her everything. She lost her crown for her dignity. I do not know if she was brave or simply certain, but I know this. The space she left behind was the space I walked into. And I walked into it with no idea what I was walking toward. Entry 2. The Orphan. Esther 2:1-11. Imagined Interior. My name before the palace was Hadassah. It means myrtle, a small tree that blooms even in difficult conditions. My parents named me before they died, before I became Mordecai's responsibility, before I became someone who needed to survive. Mordecai was my cousin. He took me in when my parents were gone and raised me as his own daughter. I want you to understand what that means. A man who had his own life, his own work, his own concerns, choosing to take a child into his home and love her. He taught me everything. He also taught me to keep one thing secret: my people, my nationality, my identity as a Jewish woman. We were exiles in Persia, descendants of those carried away from Jerusalem generations before. We lived carefully, quietly, never drawing attention. And then the king's decree reached us. Every beautiful young woman in Susa to be brought into the palace. I was brought. I did not choose this. I want to be clear about that, because sometimes Esther's story is told as if she volunteered, as if she raised her hand and stepped forward. I was taken. Beautiful girls didn't get asked in palaces. They got collected. Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the court of the harem every day to find out how I was and what was happening to me. Every day. I held on to that. When everything else was uncertain, the strange food, the unfamiliar faces, the year of beauty treatments that was actually a year of waiting, I held on to the image of Mordecai walking, still there, still watching. Not unlike another watcher I was beginning to understand. Entry 3, Becoming Queen. Esther 2, 12 to 18. We were each given 12 months. 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. A year of preparation for one night with the king. One night. After which, if the king did not call your name again, you went to the second harem, the house of the concubines, and you waited there, not a wife, not a queen, not free, for the rest of your life. I watched the other women prepare. I watched them ask for jewelry, for elaborate clothes, for every adornment they could carry into the king's presence. When my turn came, I asked for nothing, only what Haggai suggested. Haggai was the king's eunuch, the man who had overseen my preparation, who had given me the best place in the harem, who had assigned me 7 maids and moved me to the best rooms. He knew the king. I trusted his knowledge over my own instincts. I went to the king with nothing except what someone wiser than me recommended. The king loved me more than all the other women. That is what the scripture says. More than all the others. He set the royal crown on my head. He made me queen. And I stood there in the throne room of the most powerful empire in the world, an orphan, an exile, a Jewish girl with a secret. And I felt something I have no clean word for. Not triumph, not joy, something quieter. The feeling of a door opening that you did not knock on. And the understanding somewhere beneath all that silk and the crown and the applause that this was not about me, that I had been placed here, that someone had been arranging the pieces of this story long before I arrived in it. I did not know yet what the story required of me. I would find out soon enough. Entry 4. Mordecai at the gate. Esther 2, 19 to 23, Esther 3, 1 to 15. Mordecai sat at the king's gate every day. He heard things there, the conversations of the officials, the movements of power, the undercurrents of an empire. One day, he heard 2 of the king's officers plotting to assassinate the king. He told me. I told the king in Mordecai's name. The plot was investigated, the officers hanged. it was recorded in the King's Chronicles. And then, nothing. Mordecai received no reward, no acknowledgement, no promotion. It was simply recorded and filed away. I have thought about that many times since. The faithful act that went unnoticed. The good deed that seemed to disappear into silence. But nothing in this story actually disappears. And then came Haman. The king elevated him above all the other nobles. He gave him a seat of honor higher than any other official. And he commanded everyone at the king's gate to bow down before Haman. Everyone bowed, except Mordecai. Day after day, the other officials asked him, "Why do you not obey the king's command? Why will you not bow?" He told them he was a Jew. Haman noticed, and Haman, this man of enormous power and apparently no proportion, decided that killing Mordecai was not enough. He would destroy every Jewish person in the entire empire. 127 provinces. Every man, woman, and child, because one man would not bow. He went to the king. He said there was a certain people, scattered, different, not keeping the king's laws, who were not worth tolerating. He offered 10,000 talents of silver to have them destroyed. The king gave Haman his signet ring. The decree went out. On a single day, in every province, every Jewish person was to be killed. I did not know yet, but Mordecai did, and he was already walking toward the palace. The decree had been sent. Across 127 provinces, a death sentence for every Jewish person in the empire. Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and cried out in the middle of the city. And then he sent a message to Esther, the orphan in the palace, the queen with the secret, the woman who had been placed by a silent and sovereign God exactly where she needed to be. He was about to ask her the most terrifying question of her life, and she was about to answer it. Next time, the uninvited approach to the throne, the banquets, the gallows, and the line that will stop you in your tracks. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Subscribe. Part 2 is coming next week. And please, share this with a woman who needs to know that where she is right now is not an accident. Until next time, when we open Esther's diary.